Most people would do squats first and then leg curls, and I don't think that's right for most folks.
3 days ago, you did squats. Right now, you still can't lower yourself onto a toilet seat without grabbing the wall for support first, and you're not entirely sure whether to laugh about it or genuinely be concerned. So let me ask you something honestly. Why is the one single muscle group that literally carries you through every single day of your life the exact same muscle group you dread training more than anything else on your entire schedule? For decades now, the gym world has repeated the same tired mantras at you, passed down almost like scripture: no pain, no gain, squat or die, and the famous one, never skip leg day. But what if I told you that recent science has essentially proven traditional leg day, at least the way most people run it, is physiologically broken? There's an alternative exercise out there that activates your quads just as effectively as back squats do. It hits your calves even harder, and your body recovers from it in roughly 3 hours instead of the usual 72, which changes everything about how often you can actually train legs in a given week. The hidden cost of a heavy squat. Here's what's actually happening inside your body during a heavy squat that nobody bothers explaining to you at the gym. As you descend under a loaded bar, you take a breath, hold it, and brace your entire midsection hard. That specific technique has a name. It's called the Valsalva maneuver. And during that exact moment under load, your intra-abdominal pressure spikes to over 200 millimeters of mercury. Now, I know that number probably means nothing to you in isolation, but just understand this: that's an extremely high pressure reading by any physiological standard. Here's the actual problem hiding inside that number though. That same intense pressure squeezes down on the major vein responsible for returning blood back to your heart, which means less blood makes it back to your heart in that moment, which in turn means your heart simply has less blood available to pump back out to the rest of your body. Then you finish the rep, release that held breath, and for a few disorienting seconds afterward, your brain isn't receiving quite enough blood flow. That's precisely why you see stars after a genuinely heavy set of squats, because your legs happen to contain the largest blood vessels found anywhere in your entire body. But honestly, that's just the opening act of this story. What squats actually do to your muscle tissue. Two researchers named Vincent and Vincent, and yes, that's genuinely their real names. I'm not making that up. And it still catches me off guard every time I say it out loud. Wanted to understand exactly what happens inside your muscles in the aftermath of a heavy squat session. So they measured something called creatine kinase. Creatine kinase is essentially your body's built-in damage alarm system. The moment your muscle fibers get genuinely torn up during training, this specific enzyme floods directly into your bloodstream. Think of it like the check engine light glowing on your car's dashboard when it lights up. Something inside is broken down, and ignoring it doesn't make the underlying problem go away. Your normal, healthy baseline creatine kinase level should sit somewhere between 35 and 175 units. That's simply your resting baseline. Now, after a genuine squat session, trained lifters, meaning people who train regularly and consistently, hit levels around 1,349 units. And people who don't train regularly at all hit a staggering 3,272 units. Let me put that into real perspective for you. That's roughly 19 times higher than your normal resting level. If your check engine light typically glows dimly at level 1 following a hard workout, after a real leg day, it's flashing violently at level 19. But here's the part that genuinely surprised me most. Those damage markers don't even peak the following day like you might assume. They actually peak somewhere between 72 and 96 hours after the original workout, and it takes a full week to 9 days before everything fully returns back to your normal baseline levels. The science nobody at your gym wants to admit. Here's the part that genuinely frustrates me. Walk into literally any commercial gym and ask a random person what the single best leg exercise is. They'll all give you the exact same answer, practically word for word. Squats, bro, king of all exercises. Okay, but what does the actual published research say about that claim? Shkarabot and his research team conducted a massive review back in 2016, published in the European Journal of Applied Physiology. They examined the full body of existing research on something called the bilateral deficit. Here's what that term actually means in plain English. When both of your legs work together simultaneously during a movement, each individual leg actually produces less force than it would if it were working entirely on its own. It's a bit like you and a friend both pushing the same car together, but for some strange reason, you both somehow generate less combined force pushing together than you would separately, as though your nervous systems were quietly working against each other rather than in sync. That doesn't intuitively make sense, right? But that's genuinely what happens with your legs during bilateral movements like squats. Researchers discovered that when both legs work together during a lift, each individual leg produces somewhere between 7% and 25% less force than it would generate working entirely alone. So let's tally this up honestly. Leg day makes you dizzy from restricted blood flow. It spikes your muscle damage markers to roughly 19 times higher than normal. And on top of all that, your muscles aren't even firing at their full individual potential the entire time you're doing it. Yeah, traditional leg day has some serious problems built into it, where this actually gets good. But here's where the story genuinely turns around, and it's the part that made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about leg training. West and his research team ran a study in 2014, published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, specifically designed to test an alternative approach. They took 11 already reasonably strong men and had them perform 5 sets of genuinely heavy sled drags. We're talking about 75% of their own body weight loaded onto the sled. That's a serious amount of resistance, not some token warm-up load. Then they measured those same creatine kinase damage markers that Vincent and Vincent had tracked after squatting. The result? 0 measurable damage spike. None whatsoever. Then researchers tracked how long it actually took these men to fully recover afterward. Instead of the roughly 72 hours typically required after heavy squatting, their muscles were completely recovered within just 3 hours, with comparable muscle activation and comparable overall training intensity to the squat protocol, which is exactly what makes this finding so counterintuitive. And the supporting research backs this finding up directly. Scientists compared actual muscle activation between heavy sled pushes and traditional back squats using EMG technology. That's how researchers measure the electrical activity firing through your muscle tissue during a given movement. But here's the critical detail worth paying attention to. When you perform a squat, your lower back sits under significant mechanical stress, and there's real injury potential if your technique isn't close to perfect throughout the lift. With the sled push specifically, that risk essentially disappears. Because you're pushing horizontally along the ground rather than carrying loaded weight directly on your spine, your lower back barely has to engage at all throughout the movement. How to actually push a sled correctly. Now let me walk you through exactly how to perform this movement with proper technique. Walk up to the sled and grip either the vertical posts or the handles, whichever configuration your particular sled has available. Keep your arms almost fully straight. Think somewhere around 95% extension, with just a small, natural bend remaining in the elbows. Your arms aren't actually doing any pushing here. They exist purely to connect your body to the sled itself. Next, lean your entire body weight forward into the sled. Imagine you're crouched at a starting line, about to sprint, and someone's just called out on your marks. That same forward-leaning angle you'd naturally adopt in that moment, that's roughly the angle you want here. Somewhere around 45 degrees, your weight should rest primarily on the balls of your feet, almost as though you're standing on your tiptoes, with your heels just barely grazing the ground beneath you. As for head position, look down at a spot on the ground roughly 10 feet in front of you. Don't look up ahead, and don't look straight down at your own feet either. Just fix your gaze on that single spot on the ground. Now for the actual push itself. Here's exactly what you're going to do. Drive one foot into the ground as forcefully as you possibly can, as though you're actively trying to stomp a hole straight through the floor beneath you. That single leg drive pushes the sled forward roughly 1 foot of distance. The instant that foot makes contact and drives downward, your other foot lifts off the ground and swings forward. Then that second foot stomps down hard in turn, driving the sled forward another foot of distance. Think of the whole movement this way. You're not pushing the sled using your arms. You're not pushing it using your upper body at all. You're essentially walking the sled forward using pure leg drive. Here's something genuinely important to keep in mind throughout though. Your core needs to stay fully braced the entire time you're pushing. Take a breath in, tighten your abs as though someone's about to punch you directly in the stomach, and maintain that tightness throughout the entire push. This accomplishes 2 separate things simultaneously. It protects your lower back from strain, and it helps transfer all of that raw leg power directly into forward sled movement instead of your torso simply collapsing forward under the effort. Your arms should feel almost nothing throughout this entire movement. They're purely there to hold onto the sled itself. Genuinely, if your arms start burning during the set, that means you're pushing with your arms instead of your legs, and you need to correct that. And if your lower back starts hurting during the movement, either you're failing to brace your core properly, or you're standing too upright rather than maintaining that forward lean angle. Choosing the right weight. Okay, but what about actual loading? How much weight do you need on the sled? And the honest answer is you need it genuinely heavy. Here's a simple test to confirm you've got it right. If you're able to jog while pushing the sled, it's loaded far too light. You should instead be moving in a slow, deliberate march, taking one powerful, controlled step at a time. Think about the sensation of pushing a car that's completely run out of gas. That's roughly the resistance level you're aiming for here. Your gym might have dedicated weight sleds, prowler sleds, or possibly just a flat platform you can load weight plates onto directly. Start with your own approximate body weight loaded onto the sled, so if you weigh 180 pounds, load 180 pounds onto it. Then adjust the weight up or down from that starting point based on how it actually feels. Aim to push the sled at least 15 to 20 yards per working set. Perform 4 to 6 total sets, resting 2 to 3 minutes between each one. My personal recommendation is running this specific exercise 3 to 4 times per week, given how quickly it allows you to recover. 3 more options if you don't have a sled. Sleds are genuinely excellent, but what happens if your gym doesn't actually have one available? Or what if you simply want more variety built into your training? Let me walk you through 3 additional options that sound almost too simple to be legitimate, but the underlying research backs every single one of them. First, incline walking. I already know exactly what you're thinking. Walking? Seriously? That can't possibly count as a real workout. But researchers specifically measured muscle activation during incline walking compared directly against flat ground walking, and here's what they actually discovered. Your glute activation increases by 345% when walking on a 10% incline or steeper, not 45%, 345%. And your quads and calves are working substantially harder as well, because every single step is now pushing directly against gravity's resistance. But here's the genuinely beautiful part of this entire approach: there's essentially zero joint impact involved. Your knees feel completely fine throughout, and you can realistically perform this exercise every single day without issue. So here's exactly how to do it. Head to any treadmill at your gym, set the incline to somewhere between 12 and 15%, and walk for 20 to 30 minutes at a pace where you're genuinely breathing hard, but can still hold a conversation if needed. Alternatively, find an actual hill outdoors. Walk up it, walk back down, and simply repeat that cycle. There's no complex technique to learn here, and no form concerns to worry about whatsoever. Next, here's something that genuinely surprised me when I first came across it. Track cyclists carry some of the biggest, most developed quadriceps found anywhere in competitive sports, and a number of them never touch a squat rack at all in their training. So what exactly are they doing instead? Research conducted on older men, not elite athletes, just regular, ordinary guys, found that 12 weeks of progressive cycling produced genuinely measurable quad growth over that period. But here's the critical detail that made the difference. They weren't simply doing steady-state cardio. They were performing high-resistance, low-cadence cycling specifically. So what does that actually mean in practice? Get on a stationary bike and crank the resistance setting way up until it genuinely feels heavy to pedal through. Then pedal slowly, somewhere around 40 to 60 revolutions per minute, as though you're actively pushing against real weight resistance with every single stroke of the pedals. Perform 10 rounds of 30 seconds at maximum effort, resting 90 seconds between each round, then repeat the cycle. Your quads will genuinely be screaming by the end of it, but just like with sled pushes, there's minimal underlying muscle damage involved, so you recover quickly and can realistically repeat this session multiple times throughout the week. And the third option is slightly more demanding, but still genuinely excellent. Hill sprints, though just 10 minutes total is all you actually need here. Incline walking is fantastic for overall leg development, but hill sprints push things even further beyond that. Here's exactly why. Incline walking activates your muscle tissue effectively, but genuine sprinting recruits your type 2 fast-twitch muscle fibers, specifically the exact fibers primarily responsible for growth and explosive power output. On top of that, sprinting triggers a substantial surge in testosterone, growth hormone, and IGF-1, your body's core muscle-building hormones, far beyond anything walking alone could realistically produce. Think about it this way. Incline walking is roughly equivalent to performing 20 repetitions with a relatively light weight. Hill sprints are more comparable to performing 8 reps with genuinely heavy weight instead. Both approaches work effectively, but sprints ultimately build more muscle in considerably less total training time. Find yourself a genuinely steep hill. Sprint up it for 10 to 15 seconds at a time, then walk back down while you recover fully and repeat the cycle. 6 to 8 total sprints, and you're completely finished within about 10 minutes, structuring your actual training week. So how exactly should you structure all of this across a full week? You're going to be training legs 3 to 4 times per week total. I know that sounds genuinely excessive at first glance, especially compared to the once-a-week leg day most people are used to, But remember, you're recovering from this style of training in roughly 3 hours rather than the standard 72, which means you can realistically train this frequently without issue and without ever hobbling around dreading the next set of stairs. Here's what a genuinely well-structured week looks like in practice. On Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you're performing heavy sled pushes as your primary leg work. Or, if you can't make it to a gym with sled access on a given day, simply swap that session out for the high-resistance bike intervals instead. Then, over the weekend, pick a single day dedicated purely to a flush session. This functions as your active recovery work. Perform either the incline walking protocol, or if you're feeling genuinely explosive that day, hit the hill sprints instead for that same 10-minute window. That's the entire structure, 4 total training days across the week. And through this approach, you're stimulating genuine leg growth roughly 4 times more frequently than the average person running traditional leg day just once a week ever manages to achieve, all while spending less time limping around afterward than they do.